Hi, Aura. Thank you for letting me interview you. Um, First off, can I get your name and the school and what um what subject you teach or grade level and your years of experience?
Yes. So my name is Aura. I am currently a Montessori teacher at a public Montessori school in the Bronx, New York. I have mixed age groups in my classroom, and I teach grades first, second, and third grade, and I have been in the classroom for about 10 years now.
That's great. Okay, first question. How do you communicate with your students, parents, and colleagues?
All right. So would this be in any specific way or just in general?
In general.
Okay. So, well, firstly, communication is always centered on connection. You always want to find a place of commonality between your students, your parents, and or your colleagues. And you always want to take into consideration them as a person, courteousness, gracefulness, respect, all of those really important pieces that help people feel appreciated and welcomed and valued is fundamental and essential, not only to the field of education, but also anywhere in general, but especially in education where there's so much work to do and oftentimes there's a lot of needs. But the process is much smoother when people communicate with their heart and they first and foremost always acknowledge how much they care about either their students, their colleagues, and or their parents.
Okay. What are your favorite classroom strategies for student learning and for classroom management?
So for student learning and classroom management, you always want to center the child in a relationship build. You want to know as much about them as people as possible. So you want to always make sure that you are very clear with your students so that they are not confused, and you want to be very consistent with them. But you also want to get to know them as people, and you want to know the things that they like, the things that they don't like. You want to make sure that their education is really crafted and individualized to what is helping them reach and maximize their fullest potential. Because while there are general standards and basic, literacy and math, science, social studies skills that you want to make sure all of your students learn about and master. Beyond that, there's also the spirit. And you want to keep that spirit alive, the curiosity, the engagement, the love for learning. You really want to inspire and cultivate a classroom environment that inspires children to learn beyond their time in your classroom.
What information can you provide me? Oh, well, you're in New York, but can you provide me about the Florida system for school improvement and accountability?
Yes, so I don't know much about the Florida system for school improvement and accountability, but I can talk to you a little bit about school improvement and accountability in New York as well as in Texas, which are both states that I've taught in. So accountability comes in many ways, one of them being through standardized assessments. Those can, they can be useful and or challenging for many reasons. School improvement is also related to, at least in my experiences in Texas and in New York, are related to your day-to-day routines, making sure that teachers are making the best use of their instructional time, that they're being efficient with their learning strategies, that they are maximizing their classroom time, that they're really making use of strategies that are bringing children as much learning as possible during the daytime. So that's been a lot of my experience with school improvement, and also just relationship and culture building. Making sure that staff feels really good about coming to work every day, and that they feel really good and prepared to lead their classrooms. So, those have been my experiences with accountability and school improvement plans.
Okay. How do you collect and use data from formative and summative assessments to monitor learning gains and student progress?
Yes. So formative assessments, those get done pretty much every single day. Those are the informal day-to-day, very simple assessments that you do to make sure that what you're teaching children is actually staying with them, and to see what of all the lessons that they're getting, what they're actually making out of it. So the way I collect this data is through observation. I literally watch children. I've been trained in observation, and I have data systems. We use something called Transparent Classroom in our Montessori data collection. We also use, I have an Excel sheet that I use where I put in the children's learning scores. Reading scores, math scores. I use a reading assessment called Fountas and Pinnell for K through 5th grade reading. I have another assessment that I use called MAP, and that is a computer assessment. I also have the Montessori system in and of itself has a lot of built-in assessments. So I collect and use data all the time, every day in my classroom, and I use summative assessments to see what cumulative learning the children have made throughout the year.
Okay, how do you align your formative and summative assessments with standards?
Yeah, so I make sure that my day-to-day assessments are tied to Common Core. So in New York, we use Common Core. And I make sure that those objectives are directly tied to the Common Core standards. And you can do this by literally, if I make an assessment myself, I put the objective in there, and I make sure that the questions that I'm asking are really targeting that very standard and not something else. So I try to be very objective with ensuring that there's clear alignment between our Common Core assessments and our day-to-day formative and or summative assessments.
Tell me about your use of multi-sensory instruction to improve student achievement.
Yeah, so multisensory instruction is a big piece of the Montessori approach, because we have a lot of materials, and the materials incorporate visual, tactile, and a variety of sensorial experiences. We have a material, for example, that's called Sandpaper Letters, and that's for children in the early childhood stages to be able to sensorially explore the shapes of letters. We also have a variety of ways for children to practice learning their letters or their numbers if it's something that they struggle with. We use things like clay, we use things like fabric. We just have multiple approaches to sensory, and we try to have children access the multisensorial approaches that most helps them to learn. So we have many materials that use multisensory approaches to help children, especially children with special education needs, to help them fulfill their fullest potential when it comes to their academics and their social and emotional wellness.
Okay, how does the standards you teach affect the scope and sequence of your curriculum?
So the scope and sequence of the curriculum is the longitudinal perspective of your day-to-day standards. So, for example, if one of your standards is having the child be able to multiply fractions by the end of the school year, then your scope and sequence is going to want to include all of the pieces that are going to get the child to that mastery in small bits and pieces to support them in scaffolding and little by little being able to build up to that standard and skill level. So it's something, standards are something you want to use to backwards plan and help children arrive little by little at their end of year standard.
To what level does the scope and sequence of your standard-based curriculum drive your instruction decisions?
Well, I would say that it definitely impacts. I am really big on sticking to the standards and being, finding what it is that you're moving towards, like the goal that you're moving towards, the way that you want to get there, whatever it be, because there's lots of ways to teach people and children. And what matters the most in learning is consistency. As long as you're consistent, you're going to get there. So my instructional decisions are deeply impacted by my scope and sequence, and the standards that I'm supposed to teach. And beyond that, what matters even more is consistency. So as long as I'm being really consistent in my approach to education, to the day-to-day learning, and the children are hearing the same thing over and over again, and they're just getting more of it little by little, it gets challenging in small bite sizes, then that's how I approach my scope and sequence and how I use the standard-based curriculum. Let me know if that makes sense.
Okay, last question. How do you incorporate character-based practices into your classroom management?
That's a huge piece. Character-based education is really important. You have to teach children about character values. So anything from integrity to self-control to courteousness to forgiveness. I mean, those are all parts, like really an important part of an excellent education program, because children have to practice. You have to be taught those things, not only at home, but school should be an essential piece of that as well. So, for example, integrity is a big part of what we talk about at school every day. And we talk about it in so many different ways. I'm always talking to the children about how if I turn my back for whatever reason, I shouldn't have to worry that they're touching their friend. I have elementary school, so the children are still learning how to control their bodies. They're still learning how to keep their hands on themselves. And I talk to them a lot about integrity. If if I turn my back, I shouldn't have to worry that you're touching your friends, or I shouldn't have to worry that you're talking if you're not supposed to be talking at that time, or I shouldn't have to worry that you're going to break the rules because somebody's not watching you. Integrity is doing the right thing all the time, even if someone's not watching. So, that's one form of talking about integrity. We talk about self-control a lot, and we incorporate it throughout our day. Like, before we have lunch, we sing the song, and no one can eat their food until everybody has their lunch served, and until everybody, has at least one plate of food in front of them. And that can be hard for children because, sometimes they're hungry or they're impatient, and they have to learn over time how to just control themselves and wait for the rest of their community, because that's also an important part of being human, is being patient with your neighbors. And it's also called self-control, just being able to control your body, even if you're feeling hungry, or you're feeling upset, or you're feeling angry, or you're feeling really excited. You have to be able to control yourself and your body. So we practice that a lot throughout the day. And we talk about it explicitly, and we give it a name. And we read a lot of books about it as well.
Okay, well, thank you